Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Chris Andrew podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking to Dr. Georgie Harriss. Georgie is a Melbourne-based writer, researcher, and theatre maker who lectures in writing for film and TV at the Victorian College of the Arts. Georgie's own PhD explored queer and pleasure-centred possibilities for narrativizing lived experiences of trauma. They wrote across platforms, and in 2022, their play Lovebird was published by In Case of Emergency Press. By being in both the worlds of academia and commercial writing, Georgie gets to see distinct but oddly related worlds, and I'm really keen to hear the thoughts and experiences of a writer who's not only talented as a thinker, but living and succeeding in what is a very tough arena. This episode, and basically everything I do, is brought to life by my incredibly attractive and intelligent Patreon patrons. So heartfelt thanks from me to all of you that are listening today. If you like the show, but you aren't able to back it financially, I'd love it if you could consider taking a moment to hit like, save, 5 stars, or whatever it is on the platform that you're listening/watching from. And if you do like an episode in particular, please do think about sharing it with a friend. It makes a huge difference, and I really appreciate it. All right, on to today's chat with Dr. Georgie Harriss. We were just catching up before I hit record, and Georgie, you told me that you were a runner on Real Housewives of Melbourne. How did you never? Has this never come up? Should be the first thing that you tell me in a bio.
Yeah, I guess so. I did it a couple of times. I mostly was working at the production company that made it at the time. So
that was a really well edited show from memory.
On-set stuff.
Yeah.
It's very schmick. Yeah.
No, I don't mean in that sense. I mean as in whoever was doing the social editing to make people look, I mean, that's the whole point of those reality shows, to do the cut to make somebody look particularly malicious or crazy or whatever.
Yeah, well edited, exactly. Not well scripted, because it's not scripted.
What?
I know. No, it's very well cast and very well edited.
Were you on the one with the drummer from Silverchair, his wife? Was she on that one?
Which one? What was her name?
Okay, I'll look it up. This is too important to miss. Drummer from Silverchair, wife, Real Housewives. Jackie Gillies.
Yeah. And so mostly I worked at the production company next door. It was in like an old bank, and one side would be dedicated to the scripted shows, and the other side would be dedicated just to Real Housewives. That's because it's where the money was.
Right. Like, did any outlier experiences from doing that? I mean, I feel like everything about that would be interesting. Come on, share something.
I mean, they kept bringing the rubbish from set to the office, and then I was like, you can't do this. Where am I meant to put it? Yeah, but that conversation didn't go well, unfortunately.
The pushing back on rubbish being dumped in your office?
No.
Right.
Just had to deal with it.
It's a shame, because I thought that if anyone understood how to treat people well, it would be the producers of reality TV programs.
Yeah, I know. Well, if you've seen Unreal, I think that's the main takeaway.
I haven't. What is it?
It is a scripted show about the Bachelor and the Bachelorette.
Right.
Making of it. It's very depressing.
Is it Australian?
It's American. It's also starring 2 of the lead cast from like season 4 of Boston Legal, if that's of any interest to you.
No, but I like to hear it.
Yeah.
Because whenever I watch those shows, I'm always like because the thumbprints of the production, obviously, and are so heavy. I'm always like wondering who I'm trying to say this in a way that sounds judgment free, but maybe it's impossible to do. But the people who are across all the narratives and then acting as an architect to them, do you have to be a particularly socially obsessed person, or can you only be a sociopath who enjoys it? And I mean that literally with excitement. I mean that with excitement. Yeah.
I'd say the latter.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I was on a game show last year that's coming out soon, actually, that had a sort of significant reality component. And even just in that, I was like in awe of like how much they were tracking and monitoring like so many social interactions.
Yeah, I know, the spreadsheets. I think there has to be a certain amount of pleasure from the spreadsheets, the whiteboards, the lines drawn across them,
Yeah.
and then also from the genuine distress
Yeah.
of
And the sort of the neutral
contestants.
approach to be like, oh, and that will be really interesting because, that's really going to bring up a lot of hatred between them. And of course, when she realizes that her husband did this, I mean, they're going to be arguing for days, and that will be great television. Like, it's just
Yeah. Well, it's this very, I guess, Western storytelling principle of the idea that narrative can only be good if it comes from conflict.
Is that a Western thing?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's sort of Southeast Asian narrative traditions that don't center conflict in the same way, whereas, all of our 3-act structure stuff, it all centers around this obstacle is faced, this antagonistic force comes in here, it climaxes here, and so on. So, yeah, like, really, I'm sure like other traditions do make use of conflict, but I don't think they're as obsessed with it as Western narrative structure is.
Have you come across any ideas for why that might be the case? Or do you have any of your own? You're allowed to generate ideas in this space. Almost encouraged.
Well, I guess it's something to do with the idea of the individual in Western culture as being the supreme force. Probably has something to do with it. So, if there's just one person who wants one thing, then there must be like other people then who are going to get in the way of that. Like, it's making others the enemy usually.
And then there's sort of the reifying of the individual being able to navigate across things to get what they want or need for themselves or whatever.
Yeah.
That's really fun. I'd never thought about that. It is actually my chief beef with, which sounds like a name of a cool segment, chief beef with most films that I watch, and I mostly watch Western films, which is that they so often will have to end in some sort of violence, or like they'll invoke, there'll be like a big murder at the end, or there'll be something like that, rather than just show something that feels a bit more relatable. Maybe that's because I live a life, thankfully, pretty free of murder, although it would come at the end, I guess.
I suppose so.
On the individualism thing, I read a cool study that looked at communitarian values as being identifiable right down to the specific valleys and whatever, depending on which places, and this was done in China, looking at which communities were wheat farming ones and which were rice farming ones, because rice farming needed to be collaborative by nature and people would need to work together to achieve outcomes, whereas wheat farming, you would benefit by being really good and at doing it, and then sort of out competing people and taking over more space to do it. I'm butchering the details, but the principle was that to this day you could find those demarcations in Chinese culture from region to region.
That's really fascinating.
And so I wonder then if it would be foolish to bother making reality TV in some of those rice valleys.
You think? Well, I mean, surely there's a format of reality TV where people, have to work communally.
Maybe that's where these Japanese ones come in, where it's very much everybody versus the individual.
Yeah.
Much to think about. So to chart the path then, how do you square as one person spending your time doing something like being a runner in for, the sociopath club of a reality TV show, and to then also, now you're working as an academic, teaching advanced theories and doing your own research. Like, how's this the same path to you?
Sort of never thought of it as the same path. But I guess, I'm still very interested in structure. I'm still very interested in narrative. And I definitely learned a lot through working on documentary reality TV rooms. And I take that with me. But I've definitely become less interested over the years, I guess, in, that sort of commercialization and commodification of narrative. I think, there's so many different ways to approach it that isn't necessarily focusing on getting people's attention and getting people sort of like, addicted in the same way that reality TV is trying to do. Having said that, I still watch reality TV from time to time.
But as an outsider, it seems like almost the same types of experience, particularly given your research areas of looking at the roles of narratives in trauma. Kind of seems like it's dealing with the same clay in a way.
Does it? Maybe. I'm definitely, I guess that's one of the like big shifts that happened for me in terms of thinking about narrative between when I studied screenwriting and then like worked in television and then now moving to academia, is sort of studying to like reject those like narrative structures that bring about great conflict and great closure. And so sort of the idea of using like narrativizing lived experiences of trauma for me isn't usually about healing or, you know, bringing about any sense of like healing or catharsis. It's more about looking at the process of writing about those experiences in a way that centers creative pleasure, because I feel like that's something that we haven't talked a lot about, that maybe, you know, people don't actually want to heal themselves. They just want to have fun playing with the material.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think like a lot of like, you know, the experience of trauma and living with trauma is often taking a step back from it at the time and like thinking about the ways that it is, in a way, it's so embedded in one's life and it's so like traceable in many ways. But then there's also these moments of rupture. And it's those sort of moments of rupture that are interesting and that make trauma what it is. And so trying to narrativize it in a way that tries to like smooth over those ruptures feels like it's doing not only the experience as a disservice, but like the creative process a disservice. And so, yeah, thinking about how locating those moments and tending to them without trying to sort of patch them over can be actually like exciting and pleasurable and weird and absurd. And yeah, I think that's what really like really interests me about revisiting those my own experiences in a textual form.
It's so interesting because I feel like it's I mean, it's such a trope for artists and for creatives to deal with something that directly is painful for them and to narrativize it in that way that you described. So say if you were in a house fire or something and then you wrote a play about the house fire and say it was really healing for me because I got to do this. And so it sounds like two things maybe. One, you're maybe misequating the idea of what healing is and also they're not honoring the opportunity that the creative process of navigating that offers, because it could be something to echolocate against and enjoy in the sense that it's a truth and it's your life and it's an experience and it's one that will be shared with other people, rather than to have the contemporary psychological valence over it, which is like, by working through something I have transformed past it and this no longer affects me or something like that. Is that close?
Yeah. I mean, but I wouldn't want to say that people can't heal themselves through writing about something. I think there's probably is a lot of evidence to suggest that journaling, particularly in a private capacity, and like working to re-narrativize some of those experiences that were missed at the time, can be really helpful and can make you look at those experiences in a different way. But I think it's just like there has been a lot of research into that, and there have been a lot of people talking about writing about experiences or making art about experiences being healing. And I think, once again, that could be true. But what is missed, I think, is that not everybody is seeking that. And some people maybe, feel like healing takes place in a different arena to, like, you know, words on the page. And that doesn't mean that they don't see value in writing about those experiences. It's just that it's more, it's about how the material is played with and manipulated in interesting ways. It's not about revealing the truth of the experience necessarily. Yeah.
I think also there's a cultural weight because of the strength of the stickiness of the idea that processing something artistically is a surefire way to deal with something, which incentivizes people, particularly early on in their artistic career, to think that you need to, or like that you owe it to audiences or something, to mine distressing personal experiences. Because I feel like I see a lot of art, again, particularly from people early on in their careers, of people who are presenting stuff in a way that I think risks being not only not transformative, but kind of like printing out an experience and then you're commodifying it as well, even if it's not for money. You're putting it in front of people for like some sort of social dialogue, and I think that could be a catastrophe. Particularly the idea that you have to suffer to make something that's worthwhile, like suffer through the process of making something. Because I don't know. Do you look at that at all?
Definitely. Well, there's this idea that I guess the worst thing that's ever happened to you is inherently the most interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely not the case. It may be, but
Sure.
Like, I think there's, so many other different avenues that can be explored in your art. That's not just like, the deep trenches of pain.
And that's kind of back onto the Western narrative that you're talking about at the beginning, the find the point of the heightened conflict. And yeah, this is super interesting because I feel like we're at a point where our central points of narratives are really crumbling and weakening in terms of where we all go to find things. But then what resonates with all of us seems to be so diffuse. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm getting too much on a high horse that I don't know anything about. Certainly I'm getting too much on a high horse I don't know anything about. But do you think that the stories we're consuming are changing in an unusual way at the moment?
Yeah, well, I think about this in terms of like TV now, because we're not usually talking broadcast television anymore. There's really no consistent length to episodes, and so it sort of means that screenwriters, they get to feel out the shape of the narrative a little bit more, and they get to think, okay, it doesn't have to be a tight 47 minutes, how much space that this particular part of this story should take up. Having said that, I think it probably leads people astray more often than not, and they just make stories like bigger than they need to be and longer than they need to be.
Well, the incentive's there because you need to make like a series of something. Like if you have a great story that you can tell in 12 minutes, it's not much utility to sell to a network or whatever.
Yeah, and then I guess comparatively, you've got social media and like Instagram Reels and TikToks, and that was sort of returned to that really short form video where you're consuming a lot of different videos in quick succession that are all separate, but part of your brain is trying to like piece them together as a whole and create some kind of flow between them. And I wonder what that's doing to our brains and our sense of narrative. I think it'll be interesting to wait and find out.
I'd like to see, I always imagine heaven as when you die, you just get to see data on anything that interests you.
Yeah.
Like I really regularly conceive of that because there's just so much silent evidence all the time for all sorts of things that would be jaw-dropping if we were to reckon with them. And I feel like one of them, like it's so over discussed, but it's worth over discussed and yet under discussed in so many ways as well. But the use of phone and quick stories, and I reckon I read more books between ages 10 and 15 than I did between 25 and 40. Like it's not because I didn't get better at reading or love reading more. It's just I replaced that type of thinking. And I'm not giving some great worth to books that can't also exist in screen-based consumption. But there is an undeniable difference, and so there will be qualities and advantages and disadvantages of each. And the data that I would like to see is like, what is the global drop-off in reading across society? It would be terrifying. I had a friend who's a writer, and he said that to become a bestseller in Australia, you need to sell 2,000 copies or something like that to be a bestseller. And I couldn't believe it. I was like,
Wow.
Like that's friends and family numbers. I mean, not quite, but like
maybe for you.
Yeah. Like a big family, but like how damning is that for society?
That's nuts. Yeah. My God. And someone told me that actually the average advance for a book in Australia is $5,000.
Oh.
And almost nobody sells more books than that to like get more than the advance.
Oh.
So when you think about that, just in terms of like labor, like compensation for labor, that's wild.
Yeah, I mean that's the problem with the free market when nobody reads it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember reading a few years ago that the average British writer made like $15,000 a year or something like that, and in Australia it was likely to be less. And the consequence of that is that everybody that does that stuff is supported by a partner or their family or like that, which of course massively influences the types of stories that you get to have told.
Absolutely. Overwhelmingly middle class
and
greater.
Yeah, well, I feel like we're too mean to the middle class and too nice to the upper class by labeling everything like by using middle class as a derogatory term. What happened to the upper class? When's everyone going to get upset at them for having all the money? They got way more than
I know, they've really distracted us.
Yeah. Okay, then. So you're still writing. So I want to hear from you about the journey back and forth between hardcore academic ideas and international conferences and all that comes with that, and then stepping back out to be writing comedy scripts and to be writing plays and collaborating with others in that world. Is that difficult?
Yeah, it's one of those things that some people seem to be able to switch seamlessly between. Yeah, my brain definitely can't do it. Spend sort of months doing just the one thing before I really shift gears to doing the other thing. And I always feel rusty whenever I'm moving to the new thing. Going back to like writing screenplays at the moment has been really weird because the transitions have to be a lot sort of sharper, and you have to be a little bit clearer about what's actually happening and what we're seeing. Whereas when I made the transition originally from screenwriting to writing for theatre, I had to really learn to pare back stage directions and notes for actors, because particularly if you're like producing your own work and you've got to be in the same room as the actors are going to hate you if there's too many directions. And because of the nature that it's a live iterative work that should be able to be done slightly differently, every performance and every production, you want to be able to create space for that and space for it to like live and grow and change with the collaborators that are working on any particular show or production. Whereas like making a film, you have multiple takes, but you've really only got one crack at hitting the final product.
This is always my as someone who makes music is my terror at the format of stage and also film, that you spend so long working on something and it's hard to know if it's good or why it's not good or why it is good, because there are so many other gravities the whole way through. Whereas, you sit at a piano, you play something and like, oh, this is like, I feel like you just immediately have a stronger handle.
Is there ever any time that you you do something and then you come back to it later to record it, or you've already recorded it and you listen back to the recording and you're like, oh, this wasn't as good as I thought it was at the time?
I mean, all the time, but it's obvious why. Like, yeah. Like I for me at least, I feel like didn't execute this properly, or didn't invest enough time at this element or whatever it is. But it's not because I revisit the original idea and be like, oh, there's nothing here.
Yeah, definitely. I think that can happen in text-based forms where you're like, I thought this was so genius at the time.
I feel like it happens all the time. So every time I see a play, like I feel like, particularly if I see a bad one, or sorry, one that I don't enjoy, like can see how like any element of it could have been great, or how the idea was loved at the time or something. But then there are just so many, there are so many things you need to get right. I remember I saw West Side Story, which is a production that I love. And I saw it, I shouldn't name names. Oh, they're not coming after me. I saw the Opera Australia production of it. And I thought it sucked, and I was like, "This is really wooden, and I'm not feeling anything." And this is from I know the text, and I know the music, so I already I'm primed to sit there and cry and be like, "This is it's so good, I love this." But it was really it just gave me nothing, and I thought, "Oh man, if I was Leonard Bernstein and I sat down and watched this, and this was the first time it had been produced, I would think I've not written something that's good here."
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, I felt that about a production of Death of a Salesman that I saw as well. I was like, man, is this bad?
Yeah.
I don't know, and it's the only production I've seen of it. So
was it Opera Australia?
It may well just be bad. Yeah, take that, Opera Australia.
Yeah. They're at it again.
That's that's really fascinating, because I always wonder about that with big movies with a huge budget, lots of money. Like I think people have been talking a lot about Mickey 17 lately, and about you're like, how can something with that much money and so many people to be signing off on things along the way, how can it fall apart in this way? But I guess
I think it's easier. I think it's way easier because you get committee decisions where people, no one has to love and own every element of something. I think there's a reason that you get passion projects by insane directors that write their own things and then and that go really well.
Yeah, you're getting further and further, like people are like having a say in it that are getting like further and further away from like, having an embodied experience of like the making.
Oh,
So
that's such a
yeah,
good way of
actually
putting
it
it.
does make sense. Yeah.
And also, I mean, you can have great ideas that you can contribute to it. Like, say, if you're a comedian and you come in and your job's to add funny jokes to a film or whatever, and like it can be one thing to add a lot of gags that are genuinely really funny, but maybe that has nothing to do with the arc of the feel of the tone of the whole thing. I mean, and not because the tone isn't to be funny, but because the humor isn't from like you're not coming from the same place as the writer or whatever.
All of the pieces, individual pieces are good, but they're sort of like stepping on each other's toes.
Same for like beautiful set design, or like I'm sure there are situations where you don't want the most aesthetic set design or whatever it is. Like I feel like it's much more a big project. It's much more important that everyone's facing the same direction and much harder to achieve, which is maybe why you
Yeah.
get tyrant personalities making good stuff.
Mm.
Don't know, something to think about for the tyrants listening. Get into cinema immediately.
Yeah. Get better at tyranny, Opera Australia.
I just think
It's an art.
2025 needs more tyranny. Opera
Yeah.
Australia is the vanguard to lead this.
Yeah. They've got the most room to grow of anyone.
They've got the budget, that's for sure. I went to Tina. This is not art festival in Newcastle. Like must have been 10, 15 years ago, and I sat down at a presentation given by some NIDA students, and they were running a workshop on how theatre was going to lead to the overthrow of capitalism and the introduction of communism into Australian society. They really meant it.
Yeah.
It didn't happen, but maybe they, I don't know if they had a 20-year plan or something.
Exactly. You got to play the long game.
What do you think is the impact of writing? You're someone who writes stuff for others.
Oh,
Or for you, why do you do it? Yeah, why do you do it?
Why do I do it?
It's not for the money.
It's certainly not for the money. I think like for me, it feels good. I get enormous like personal pleasure from writing and from like, hitting like writing a sentence that I'm really happy with, hitting a certain beat, like putting two ideas together that feel like they shouldn't go together, but you just sort of like feel it in your bones and it works. And so I really enjoy that, and I know that I really enjoy that when I encounter it in someone else's work. And so I guess it's just hoping to have that back and forth as like creative sort of erotic exchange between like artist and audience. So I think that's why I do it. Nothing hugely profound or like world changing.
That is profound and world changing, don't you think?
Yeah, like I think in a small way it is. Yeah, each sort of individual interaction that we get to have, both ourselves like on the page or in the recording studio, or or like encountering someone else's work. I think it is life changing, and I think that does it. Yeah, it's a huge part of what feels good to be human, I think. So yeah, I guess I'm comparing it to ways of thinking about art as being like enacting like real social change or moving the structures of oppression. I sort of have less faith.
Yeah, I think it would be better described as claiming to move social change.
Yeah, that's what we had a presentation to do with our research outputs recently, and one of the things was trying to align genuinely trying to align our non-traditional research outputs, so our creative projects, with like the UNESCO
I was going to joke
sustainability
and say
goals.
the UN, yeah, that's so good. That's so good.
Yeah, and it was like ending poverty and like fixing climate change and all of these things, and I was just like, I don't get it.
That's funny, actually, because I'm working on the poem that's going to bring everybody down to 2 tons of carbon per person by 2026. And I've got maybe 80% of it perfect. And when I finish it, it's too powerful. It's probably too powerful to release because it's going to crumple people's cars in their garage. And
well, that's such important work, Chris. I can't wait to see
it is important. I'm doing
I can't wait
work.
to see the grant acquittal. I think that will be really interesting.
I like the baked-in presumption that nobody's doing poetry just for the pleasure of it. It's because I've received a grant and now I must.
Yeah.
Because poets are so well funded everywhere we go.
Absolutely.
Okay, so then because it seems like you have a strong handle with why you enjoy doing the work that you do and why you do it. Because there are so many people writing from so many different perspectives, you must spend time with people that are writing and look at them and be like, you're an alien to me, because we know for a fact that there are people who are like, this poem is going to change the world, or I'm writing not to have a playful collision of ideas and an erotic exchange with audience, but to project my selfhood to as many people as possible, or whatever it is. Like, does this spark any ideas in you, or have experienced it?
Yeah, yeah. Like, I encounter that all of the time with people making work, and particularly people in like screenwriting, because that
Different world.
is certainly yeah, there's this just yeah, almost delusional, I would say, belief in like the power of storytelling. Like, yeah, I'm with Maria Tumarkin on that. I hate the term storytelling. um
What does Maria Tumarkin say about why we should all hate the term storytelling? I don't know. Would you
Yeah,
believe
just
I haven't brushed up?
yeah, the idea of like, yeah, pushing all of these, ideas into these what she says, like tellable tales. That's like it's something that's prepackaged and you're passing it on, almost like it's more bioavailable, and you're passing it on to the reader, and then they're sort of passively consuming it. And she just thinks that that's a really dull and like flattening way to think about what happens
It's kind of more like how
when you're sharing
influenza
art.
works.
Exactly. So exactly. I look at people who think that like, their work can have that effect, as if they think that they're exerting some kind of like biohazard on the world. But in a good way. They think it's a good biohazard.
But it's really funny because it is undeniable that there are works that do have astonishing reach and resonance, and that people identify as having changed their lives, and not unfairly. Like, but I guess it's more to do with what are the reasons? Like, how do you dissect the reasons that is the case for say an astonishingly successful book or whatever it may be, that touches so many people? Is it because it's not because the person who was writing it had the force majeure of an earthquake, but there is a part of that, because I feel like so many of the most resonant works do come down to a large amount of skill executed by the practitioner, and
Yeah.
sometimes that does overlap with them being motivated to have exactly that effect as well. But I would say probably not most of the time. Be guessing.
Yeah. Well, I guess like a work being life changing, and a work being world changing are maybe like different things. But I guess a work may be so life changing to so many people that
Yeah,
it does hit like a critical mass and does exert some kind of effect on the world around them. But how do we measure that? And yeah, was that the artist's intention at
yeah,
the time, or is it just like the culmination of like all of these different, almost like inseparable qualities and circumstances that came together for that
yeah.
to be?
Which would be much harder to argue against, I imagine.
Mm.
What about working in screen stuff? Because those are domains of, and actually also academia, those are domains of power and authority and some means. So therefore they will be susceptible to attracting people who get profiled as psychopaths and narcissists. Like, they must be like barnacles in these places, and they must be up the top as well. As well. What is it like to, and you don't need to name names, sit in a creative space, like a screenwriting room with these people, and to generate ideas and to find why something may be good? Firstly, to save everyone's time, is it something you've encountered? And two, what does it feel like?
I'm not sure I can say that I've ever had the pleasure of being in one of those rooms where something like truly good has been created.
Right. So, but you have been in those rooms.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely. But
Yeah.
usually in a sort of lower capacity. So not usually meant to like speak that much.
Well,
Yeah,
I was going
only
to say that
speaking when spoken to.
it wouldn't attract those people unless there was a hierarchy element of those rooms in which it was sure that you were not the big dog.
Exactly. So it's, they usually, from what I encounter, they talk and they refer to like for example, like the note taker or the script coordinator a lot. Like, but they don't necessarily like, they let the person speak, but only, at very particular moments. And if you do speak when you haven't been asked to speak, not good.
Like a stern glare or just a raised eyebrow or yelling?
Yeah, like, I mean, yelling, usually like, a stern word.
Then what do you think the relationship, because I'm surprised to hear that would produce nothing good. I mean, I'm not that surprised given my personal tastes, but I also just assume that a lot of stuff does get made like that. Like in an environment where you have somebody they've got their selfhood and as the guiding star and the capacity to enhance their power as the sole motivator for all action that occurs, what stuff does get written? Because the thing is, I guess for audience members, it might not be obvious. These people are better at getting into these positions because they are motivated by that. So they'll naturally outcompete. In many instances, they'll naturally outcompete those who may be better at the writing or the thinking or the whatever it is, but they're less good at slamming down a compelling resume or bullying their way into a room. And then once they are there, they do want to have the status as well. So yeah, it must be surreal. I haven't been in that situation.
It is, and I don't think it's necessarily, it's not the fault of the people that's in the room. It's sort of more, particularly in an Australian context, it's what the funding bodies will and will not commission based on what they think particular audience demographics are going to like. And I think perhaps a little bit because Australia, like across the board, is very risk averse, and in television particularly so. So they tend to go for, I guess, what they think will be the safest option and very often miss the mark, I think. And so you're going in with this idea that often was probably like, the fifth or sixth idea that someone has pitched to the production company. It's not the thing that they're the most passionate about. And then they're like having to lead this room around this idea was like the only thing that like ticked a certain number of boxes to be able to get funded. And then from there, like, it probably has sat in development hell for like, 5 years or more these days. And people are getting more and more sick of it. Like, if something is actually greenlit for production, the amount of time that actually is dedicated to it in a writer's room is like so small compared to like the US context.
Like what's the difference?
Yeah, like the US, they would get like months in the writer's room, whereas probably in Australia, I'd say maximum 6 weeks.
It's an irony that shouldn't be lost to us in this moment, that this whole situation, and if you could document it and follow it, is for sure funnier than the comedies that are coming out of these places. Like, it would be so much more fun to witness the absurdity of that. Like 5-6 years, how can you respond to anything? And particularly like under the parameters of like, we need to make sure that we're doing something that we know works. Like, you can't do that with most artistic disciplines, but particularly not cultural stuff and comedy.
Exactly. Culture moves too fast now.
Yeah.
The development process is getting slower. So shocking.
Very interesting, because it kind of parallels the clogging that's happening with science as well. This is great, because my most recent episode of the podcast was just me talking about what I want to talk about within it, what naturally emerges. And one of the themes is the kind of how civilization seems to be biasing increasingly towards process-controlled parameters and quantifiable things in a way that makes the things that they're trying to control worse. Like, and this seems to be a prime example of it. Maybe let's get a bit positive. What are some Australian things that are being written now that are exciting to you? They don't have to be Australian. What are some things? Just anything? What's being done well, and what's the shape of how that's happened?
Yeah, I think Australian like life writing is in a really cool spot at the moment. Like, they got this Madison Godfrey's Dress Rehearsals, which is a collection of poems, which I think is really beautiful, really interesting. It's like Sarah Walker's book, The First Time I Thought I Was Dying, like Elena Savage, I think, Blueberries. I think that sort of thing is actually being done really well, because I think it's, on the whole, it's like it's a bit quieter and a little bit more nuanced. But in terms of Australian TV, there's I think the like first couple of seasons of Heartbreak High were really interesting. I haven't watched the latest one, so I look forward to that. But yeah, what about you? Have you been consuming any Australian content?
I don't consume any content. I'm too stupid. I got a baby and a toddler. The content I consume is running around after them.
Hmm.
Yeah, so sadly, nothing. But it's always interesting to me that this issue seems to be one very much of the culture of systems rather than the culture or the people themselves. Because I feel like you can, kick a football and hit 30 incredibly talented thinkers and practitioners. And we do such an appalling job of mirroring that in any way, let alone amplifying.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. It's really frustrating. Yeah. So I think there's, I guess the Australian culture has been a little bit more like on the whole stable. And so maybe that has led to like less interesting art, but I actually don't think that's the case. I think sometimes that can lead to very interesting things. But yeah, I'd say it would be more the economic systems, like economies of scale, and yeah, just the lack of appetite for risk, which is informed by the economic structures themselves, I guess.
Yeah, I wonder if I knew where you'd even begin to sort of break the back of these problems, then I'd be doing it. I feel like I worked at that for many years trying.
Well, my great theory is I think all arts funding in Australia should, like grant assessments and things, they shouldn't be no more grant assessors.
Yeah, for sure.
All of that money should just like go into a pot. And I think all arts funding should be distributed as a lottery.
That's great. I was thinking more like a pit where people had to fight.
Well, that could
Or
be
like
good too.
like the game, I don't even know what the show is, where there's a tube and there's dollar notes and you've got like 10 minutes to grab as much as you can.
See, that feels too similar to the current
to
system.
the current system. No, but it's less time consuming and less administratively expensive.
That's true.
And less degrading to the participants.
100%. You'd feel alive doing it.
Yeah.
Because I guess now people are just doing like grant applications with AI anyway. It's become like just even more of an obvious waste of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, just a lottery.
But even worse, they're also being assessed with AI. Just run it through and be like, hey, which of these is the best?
My God. But yeah, like lottery, the only outcome, the only like rules are you have to present some kind of outcome, and it can't be hate speech. And anything else, you'd get an enormous amount of terrible stuff.
You lost me on that it can't be hate speech, but this is not so dissimilar from what they do in France, is my understanding. Because in Paris, you can be paid to be a musician, like a living wage, like I don't know if it's like 50 grand or something like that. I say a living wage for a musician, and all you need to do is just prove that you're out there playing, and which makes much more sense than the way in which you inevitably have to skew whatever it is that you're presenting for the legitimacy and for weight in a way that doesn't achieve either to achieve arts grant funding. I mean, maybe most listeners don't know, but it's a hellish thing to participate in, and it is really degrading. And then also there's like 10% success rate or something. So, and it's subjectively
10%.
determined. Yeah.
10% success rate at that $5,000 advance.
Yeah, exactly. At an amount of money that you have to lie about what you're going to do with it, so that you don't seem like you're just trying to live.
Yeah, I know. It's so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like the stuff that is funded, it's not the stuff that you would expect, and it's often not that good because once again, like art it often is really good, but
no, you don't need to say that. It's not necessarily correlated to its success in achieving funding.
Exactly, and it's like the idea that we can like predict ahead of time and curate like what's going to be good.
I tried to put in funding to get to do the Eurovision competing because I it would make a big difference if I could hire a rehearsal room and things like that.
Yeah,
and I had a month's notice. There was no single grant across anywhere in Australia that was had a turnaround time that would meet that requirement, and I'd only found out in that period. So I was like, well, what do you do? And of course, it would be a meaningful win to be able to participate properly in that.
Yeah,
that would be worth investing in compared to other things that I've successfully achieved funding for.
Yeah,
it's a madness, and it's interesting. I'm going to have a conversation in a couple of weeks with Jamie Freestone, who I spoke to earlier on the podcast, about this same type of phenomena, but for science funding. And it's kind of a parallel world where people spend so much time seeking legitimacy for things that they don't know what they're going to be, that it keeps the gravity of what we already know even tighter, and so less exploration, which is of course exactly what you want from your artists and your scientists. You don't want to disincentivize them from going off into their own pastures, because as dumb as they are, hate speech included, you never know what you're going to get. Like maybe that's where we need to go. Hate speech excluded. Some hate speech. You got to. You don't want to exclude. You don't have a blanket ban.
Yeah, no.
Who are we
You
to
want
know?
to. All right, you're right. We better hire back some of those assessors to be like decide what is hate speech and what isn't, and take kickbacks.
I presume this is why we've been reporting people for the last 20 years. So we have a dossier for who to go to when we need to reintroduce the hate speech back into our system.
Yeah, exactly. So like then
Eddie
the
McGuire,
grant assessors.
this is your moment.
Now it'll just turn into like, curating the kind of hate speech that is acceptable in any given
Equally
scenario.
distributing it, so it's a strong representation. Yeah,
exactly.
hey, I'm all for it. It at least will be funnier than something that goes through 8 rounds of grant funding and 5-6 year wait, and then people working on it that don't care about it as their primary project in any way. Great. I wanted to ask, when you spend so much time learning in a detailed area as is required for a PhD or any sort of subject matter professional, you end up, I think, inevitably sculpting a lens of that topic and the world that alienates you from other people in how they see the same subject matter. What has that been for you?
Yeah. Oh, that's a really interesting question.
Thank you.
And you feel that in at any academic conference where, someone does like a really beautiful, thoughtful, but very specific presentation, and then comes times for questions. And like every question that you get is inevitably like someone imposing their very specific lens on this very specific thing. And it feels like you're just absolutely like talking past each other rather than.
And again, that's
other.
Good comedy.
It is. It is.
But what about
very
for you
like
in the stuff that you've looked at?
existentially disturbing comedy. Yeah, I find like you do after like studying something specifically and doing it through practice and like applying those ideas to practice for a very like long period of time. It does sort of become ingrained in you, and so then whenever someone like asks how you did that thing or why you did it, there's just so many separate concepts that you have to then explain and put forward, to make it clear how the work was made. And often you're like, this person doesn't need to know any of this to enjoy the work or to like interact with the work. And in some ways, knowing it might take something away from it. It's like, it's important for my process, but whether it's important for someone else's process, it's another thing. But I guess that it will be helpful for other practitioners if they want to do a similar thing. But yeah, I don't know. Like I find I always have to explain, because like I was bringing together 2 like very different specific fields, which was like queer narratology and trauma theory. And so I had to sort of like, start from the ground to demonstrate why I thought those 2 things went together. And that's the first thing that I usually have to sort of unpack or explain. And then people often be like, but what do you mean by, like, for example, then the word queer? And then you have to unpack the word queer in an academic context and a creative context. And then like, trauma, there's so many different models like of trauma. So you have to like get really specific about which one you're talking about.
And so many ham-fisted representations of both of those concepts.
Yeah, exactly. And so I find that is always a challenge. And there's very few people in the world that you would be talking to and explaining those concepts to who would still be interested, like after the first couple of like dead ends that you've reached in that conversation. I have like lots of wonderful colleagues that I could talk for hours about these things with, but certainly like a lot of people want like a sort of Cliff Notes version very quickly. And that's really hard to do.
It's not unreasonable, but yeah, that's the nature of complexity. Then last question that I'm going to ask you today is, what about for you? Has that occurred for you where you can't enjoy certain types of writing or engagement with the subject matter that you deal with because of how much you know about it or have looked at it?
I don't think so. I think I am very good at shutting down particular parts of my brain when I'm doing like different things. And so it's almost I'd say like 90% of my life I would spend forgetting that I've ever done a PhD.
That's
and I'm
for the
very
best.
thankful for that ability.
Yeah. That's great. All right. Thanks so much for joining me, Georgie. Hopefully I have you back and we can talk about some more stuff in the future because there's heaps to talk about.
Yeah,
Would you like to
pleasure.
direct anyone to any of your projects that you're working on or to garner attention while they're here?
Really, I've got a couple of conference presentations coming up, one for the Screenwriting Research Network and one for the Critical Autoethnography Conference. But other than that, read Lovebird, my play. It's out
Excellent.
there in the world.
I'll link to it in the episode description.
Beautiful.
And I'll also link to my Patreon. So thanks so much to my Patreon supporters for backing this. Plenty more interesting conversations to come. And thank you so much again for joining me today, Georgie. It was great to chat.
Thanks for having me.